Well, hello everybody, and welcome to another week of the Rec Poker Podcast, Forums Edition. I'm your host, Jim Reed, Bluffsterini in the home games, Jim in the forums, and at Hold'em_Steelers on Twitter. Just like every week, I'm joined here by a wonderful panel of Rec Poker Wizards. Panel, why don't you introduce yourself and let the folks know who you are?
Yeah, I'm Chris Jones. I'm 5x5 on PokerStars and Twitter.
I'm John Somsky. I'm Poker Geek MN everywhere.
I'm Rob Washam, and I'm Radman50 everywhere.
These guys have it together. They're the same thing everywhere. Boy, that's a nice life. Chris and I are still figuring that out. But I'd like to thank our sponsors who also have it all figured out, Website AMP and the Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino. So we have a special guest with us this week in the forums edition of the Rec Poker Podcast. You've heard his posts before. Some of my favorites in the Rec Poker forums have come from at Monkey System. We're joined by Monkey System himself today, the one and only Keith. Keith, tell us a little bit about yourself. Thanks for joining us today.
Well, I'm Keith Brandt from Wisconsin, and I'm Monkey System pretty much everywhere with a K-I-E instead of a K-E-Y.
That's right. You can't miss it.
We're already taken.
When you see Monkey System in the forums, you know you've got a good post coming. And so just like every week, that's what we've done here. We've taken a post from the Rec.Poker forums for us to discuss. We're all playing in the Rec Poker nightly home game on PokerStars, trying to take each other's play money and earn a chance at that bronze pin that everyone's so coveted. And just like every week, here we are. So Keith, you posted a hand in the forums. This one's by Monkey System, as I said. It's called Top 2 Pair on the Turn Facing Aggression. So walk us through this a little bit. What made you choose this hand? What did you think was interesting about it? And what made you post it?
I thought this hand was interesting because it was very, very complex and hard to read at the table because there was so much going on, a lot of different things to consider. And I knew I was up against a really good player, somebody who's won World Series of Poker circuit rings before. So cool. I had to think this one through. There was pressure. So what happened, or are you going to read it off, Jim? Or?
No, yeah, take us through it in your own words. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, what happened was I was the chip leader at the table. I had about, I'd say, well, I had 550K or so. And my opponent was in the big blind with a little less than me. He was the second chip guy at the table. We were already in the last 3 tables of the tournaments, and being the chip leader there, the pressure was on. I mean, if I get into a big hand with this guy and win it, I'd have a real shot at winning the thing. So I'm in the middle position, and folds to me, and I've got ace queen offsuit. So I bet 25K. I think the blinds were 5K, 10K, 10K, if I remember right. I bet 25K. Folds around to the big blind, who calls. And that's the villain, who's the successful player. And the flop comes out, queen, jack, 6, all offsuit. So I've got top pair, top kicker. Big blind folds. And I raised to, what was it, something like 70K, something that basically was like around half of the pot or so.
It looks like what actually happened here is the big blind checked, and you bet 35K.
Okay, 35K.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And then the villain clicked back and raised to exactly 70K.
So let's stop there for a second. So
that's not how it happened. That I'm still on pre-flop.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he called.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then on the flop, I bet 35K, and then he clicked back, or this was live, so he basically raised like a min raise, and I called.
And your villain is in the big blind here, I think, yes. Right? Okay. Yep. So the flop comes queen, jack, 6 river. You're there with ace, queen offsuit, so top pair, top kicker, just like you say. The pot was 65K. It's checked to you. You bet 35K, a little over half pot. and then the villain really just clicks it back to 70K.
Yeah.
So what are people, just before we even move on a little, that check raise click back, was that small sizing a part of the tournament dynamic at this point, or was it unusual? What did it strike you? How did you feel about it in the moment? Because those clickbacks are a little weird.
Yeah, it at the time it didn't seem terribly unusual. No, it might have been a little bigger, but it didn't. It doesn't stand out in my mind as something unusual for what was going on.
And I think
That's,
the best tournament players, one of the things that good tournament players do is they maximize the maximum, they exert the maximum amount of pressure with small bets. So I think one thing that, if people that are playing a lot of tournaments, they're going to be using small bets strategically. And this is a good example of that. So they click it back and you call. Does anyone want to talk about anything there, or should we move to the tournament?
Well, the only thing I would say is that this does, unless this has become a norm, this does like raise my, radar or hackles or something. It raises something when this happens, when you get the absolute min raise in this kind of spot. It's because it's a bet that's not generally, and I mean, players can have multi-street plans with this and they can do this without having the nuts, right? But it's a bet that's not really designed to get many folds. And I think the more normal sizing would be, probably somewhere to around 100K, maybe something, maybe 90K, maybe 100K, something like that. And so when we get this direct min raise, I just get that weird tingly feeling like, oh, what's happening here? I'm never folding top pair, top kicker to this, especially with that price. And I'm never raising, I don't think, with this hand, but it's starting to get a little dicey for me, just that min bet or that min check raise.
What does that min check raise tell you? What does it make you feel, or what do you think they are doing with it?
It feels to me like somebody they don't want me to go away, but they want to increase the pot. So it leans toward value, pretty heavily toward value in my mind. We may still have some of that value beat with as strong a pair or as strong a hand as top pair, top kicker, but it is not a bet that's designed to induce folds. So I feel like it leans towards value. Like there aren't a lot of bluffs here.
That's the key to me, is that they've chosen to exert the least possible fold equity in this. So I find when people are doing this min click back, it's typically a value range. It doesn't mean that they're never bluffing, but typically if they're bluffing, they're going to want to give you less good odds so that you're going to fold more often. The only thing about this, like very experienced players can use this click back as a way to just kind of help range you on future streets, because they just get a lot of information about the strength of your hand by how you respond to it. And in fact, Keith, this is a subject that we've talked about before from one of your posts about these micro bets that we were seeing from players in the home game, that mystery player M and some other people that do these small bets with the wide ranges, right? So this, given that you're telling me this is a strong player, it does make me think it's a value range. And then the only question is, like Chris says, how much of that do you beat?
So I could see there being three reasons for someone doing a small click bet back like this. One is just a blind defense of the continuation bet. So let's say in this particular case, Keith actually had a hand like pocket fours and was just making a continuation bet. And the villain has something like King Jack. That little click back will be enough that you might actually fold it right then and there, because your pocket fours is no good if your continuation bet is basically a pure bluff. The second thing is, I believe the villain has position here. So
villain's out of position, I think. They're
out of position.
blind. Yeah.
Yeah. Villain has a big blind.
Yeah,
I
which makes
misunderstood
it all
that.
the weirder, right? That they're doing this
Right.
really small sizing that they're going to then play out of position on later
Because I
streets
could
too.
see doing the small sizing if you wanted to. Basically, you could do that small sizing to get you to the river, because then most likely you've got you've got the action on you, basically, or the
You got initiative.
the initiative, right? You've got the initiative. Most likely, it would be checked to you on the turn. You could check behind if you don't make your hand and get to the river with a very cheap price. But out of position, that just is
No,
a
yeah.
little bit. Go ahead.
I think you see that when people are in position. That is probably a good distinction to make, where people can sort of buy the river by doing this kind of move when they're in position. But when they're out of position, it really does it becomes such a value prop. I mean, they it is so rare to see a bluff like this, I think. I suppose you could see somebody do that with like a king 10 in this kind of spot, some sort of open-ended straight draw. But I think the players that do that, that's exceedingly rare. And I think the players that do that mostly do it to a bigger sizing. So I tend to read this as strong value. It's still, as I said, like value we might be able to beat. Like you might see this from a king jack, maybe, and we definitely beat that. But it's not. I'm not putting them on a lot of like draws or
Okay.
weird things in this spot.
I think the position's really key. I think if you were the kind of player that would do this click back a lot, I think it would be something that you do in position more often than out of position. So I think that's a relevant factor here. Okay, so as played, we get to the turn, and we have called, and I think no matter what, we're continuing, right? Like I don't think no one is considering folding to that min raise. Just so we're clear to our listeners. So you could re-raise. At this point, top pair, top kicker feels like one of those kind of like, it's a strong hand, but you're really behind the range that continues to your re-raise. So I think calling is the right play. Does anybody advocate for a different play? No, don't think so. Okay, so I think we all agree that the bet call is right, and I like the bet sizing too. So I think everything is going perfectly according to plan so far. So the turn is an ace. The pot is now a little over 200K, and we have top two pair. So we're feeling pretty good about the turn. The villain leads out about half pot to 100,000. And so before we talk about your action, Keith, so what are people thinking here when they lead? So it's the old check raise lead line. And just for myself, because the ace comes, if I was check raising a bluff there, I'd be tempted to slow down here, because a lot of the hands that you continue with have an ace. Not a lot of them, but many of them, given that you're the original open raiser. So if I was in the villain's shoes, I would be making a value bet here, I guess, if I was going to be betting. It doesn't feel like a good spot to bluff. What do you guys think? Or does anyone, do you have a leading range there?
If King 10 is in the ranges, both of our ranges, and it just got there.
Yeah, good point.
That's another factor.
Yep. Yep, that's a good point. So they lead half pot. So we're getting, we have to call 100,000. There's 300 in the pot after his bet. We've got top two pair. There is a straight on the board, or there's a 3-card straight on the board. We have the option to fold, call, or raise. Keith, you want to take us through your thought process in this moment? So how are you feeling when you see this bet come across?
It wasn't welcome, that's for sure. But at this point, with top two pair, I didn't feel like I could fold this.
Right.
So I was given a choice between calling and shoving, basically. And my thought was, just having played with that player before, I know how aggressive he is. I thought the shove would get him out of the hand. That's what I was thinking. And the other thought that has nothing to do with GTO or anything was if I shove and he's only doing this with like ace king or something. If I get his stack, I could very well win this tournament.
Right.
That went through my mind too.
Yeah, and
I
that is a
thought,
factor.
this is the kind of risk you have to take if you want to win these things.
Mhm.
So, but as far as where my hand stood, to be honest, I still remember feeling this is getting a little dicey already.
Yeah.
I may have just improved to second best. He might have that straight. I was more worried about the straight.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think he's so? The question like the idea that he has ace king is I think definitely possible here. But do you think he's calling your shove with that?
Yeah, that's interesting because
Top kicker on the turn.
is it a value shove or is it a bluff shove? I guess is one of the questions.
That's what I got to thinking after the tournament was over and I was driving home.
Man, I hate that drive. You have so many. You're like, oh, everything comes clear to you,
But yeah, at the time I thought, for some reason, just with my experience with that player, I thought that I was more likely to get him out of this hand at this point. He had something that he wasn't going to want to basically risk his whole tournament life when we're this close to the final table, down to the last three tables. So there was more at stake there. And that's what the thinking that I was doing. But, in hindsight, of course, the top two pair actually wasn't looking too good.
Right.
Well, the one problem you have, and we talk about this when we talk about river bets, is if you're making a bet and the only hand that's going to call you is a hand that has you beat, then you shouldn't be making that bet, right?
Yeah.
And so when you go all in, the only hand that's going to call you is a hand that has you crushed. So, I mean, who hasn't done this? I mean, I do it all the time, right? The next question though is, had you just called there, because you're going to call, you got ace, you got top two pair, you still have outs, right? You still have 8 cards that could give you a full house, right? So, if you just call there, what happens on the river? Are we getting it in anyway? Because he's not slowing down with his set.
Yeah. And
it could end up that you end up all in anyway on the river.
Right.
Yeah,
he was the one putting on the pressure. He was the one that was how's that put again? He was the one that was pushing value.
Right. Yeah, Chris, did you
so
have
he's got like 270 behind. Is that right? At this point, I mean, let's say that you called here. We're going to a river with about a 400K pot, and he's got about 270 behind, and you've got him covered. Yeah, I mean, that's going to be, it's going to be, I mean, I'm probably calling here just because I don't know what I'm going to be called. I mean, maybe Queen Jack is in there and maybe that calls me. But I don't know what I'm getting. Maybe Ace Jack is possible. But I don't totally know what there aren't that many candidates for hands that I'm beating that are going to call my shove. So but I think the end result of this is probably, it's kind of academic. Like I'm probably losing my stack anyway on the river, unless the river comes like a king or a 10.
Mm-hmm.
That might save me, maybe. And this is against villain specific hand, but if against villain specific range, I think there are some hands that villain will just give up on this river and will win anyway. So I like a call here rather than the shove, but I think given what you two had in this spot, that you're probably, I don't know, you didn't say what the river was, but whatever the river was,
I don't remember because it didn't matter.
Yeah. It wasn't an ace or a queen, I'll tell
Right,
you that
unless it was an
much.
ace, a queen, a king, or a 10, I'm think I'm going broke here, no matter what. So, it's tough to fold top two in this spot. That's my thoughts.
Hmm. So, Keith, you did some work with a solver here. Do you mind just kind of taking us through some of the results? Because you've
Yeah.
done so many great deep dives in the solver in our forums here. I think you might be our best solver poster. So I'm excited to get your take on some of this.
Yeah, the thing that surprised me with the solver output on this one was that at equilibrium, we're both getting our stacks in on the flop.
Hmm. Hmm.
Shouldn't have even gone to the turn. But as played, I should have called instead of raising all in.
I think that makes sense to me because I feel like when you call, you're still keeping in all their hands that you beat. You know, they get to stick around for another street. Maybe they're going to make another value bet. You know, maybe you can evaluate and make a value bet on the river. And I think Rob made just such a good point here earlier that when you raise the turn like that, shove, it does feel like you're turning your top two pair into a bluff because you're getting them to fold a lot of the hands that you beat. So I get that consideration. What do you guys think about shoving or raising on the flop? We did talk about it as an option. Top pair, top kicker, queen jack six. It's not like it's made of draws. So part of the problem is their check raising range is already going to be pretty tight, I think, right?
Yeah, I mean, in a vacuum, I would tend to want to raise there again, I think, except it's the min click back,
Yeah.
except the spidey sense thing, right? It gets your spidey senses tingling, so you got to figure out what that means. And if you lend credence to that makes it a scarier play or a stronger play, then maybe playing more passively is the better approach.
Yeah, I would be much more likely to get my stack in if this was a normal raise size. When it's this min size, I mean, maybe this is telling you how to play me. Min
I'm
click
writing
me
it down.
back a
I'm
lot,
writing it
right?
down
Like
right now.
I am gonna like slow down a lot because I read a lot into this because it just feels like it's a bet that you don't see a lot, and it's really suspicious.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe I'm reading too much into that. I don't know. But especially against if we're saying this is a WSOP ring winner, circuit ring winner, and somebody who we really respect their play, then my spidey sense is going off the charts. Like this is something that I need to pay attention to because this player knows what they're doing.
So do you think a weaker range there chooses a larger size? Like, do you think if they check raise a larger sizing there, it's actually with a weaker range?
Yes,
Yeah,
I do.
me too.
I think there's way more bluffs. I think there's way more that we beat when this is 100K
Mm-hmm.
raise, and then I feel very comfortable that I may still be behind, but there's a lot of that range that I now can shove into and take this down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And also you have to, we talk about this all the time, bill independent. This is a very good player who's had a lot of success in this type of tournament. So you have to respect what they're doing. And as much as it pains you, you may have to give up your top two pair and just say, conserve your stack and go on to the next hand. It's just there's so many hands that he could have right there. King 10, pocket jacks, pocket sixes are really the ones that you're most worried about, right? And all of those are in his range. I just don't know that it's as hard as it is to get away from top two. When you're facing that kind of action against that kind of player, maybe as rec players, we ought to be able to say, okay, I'm just going to release this.
Now, do you mean because the one thing that I always think about the the savvy players are more likely to be capable of bluffing with those weird sizes and rangings, you know? So I don't know if I'd level myself into trouble on that, because I'd be like, well,
Yes, that's what we do as rec players. We always assume that that pro is working us.
Yeah.
And that pro is not going to risk chips against a recreational player that he knows has something because he called that raise.
hmm
So he knows that we have something.
yeah,
He's not going to try to play games against a rec player who's liable to call him down with top two,
yeah,
right? If he doesn't have top two beat. So there's that. That's the other side of that leveling war, right?
yeah. And when that ace comes, it does. I do think it slows down some of those bluffs that he was planning on in those situations where he did have a
Yep.
bluffy spot, because um, the hands that you didn't have at least one pair beat, now you do, when that ace comes. More often enough, I think that the experienced player is going to be not bluffing very much there.
So
Um,
I think Keith, what probably should have happened, and you would have lost as little as you could have, would have been to call on the turn, and then it probably would have been a fold on the river when you got bet into for all the rest of his chips.
yeah, and I probably end up calling that river bet anyway. I don't think I
Most of
have
us
the
do.
discipline to
Yeah.
get away from it
Yeah.
there.
Yeah,
And
most of us
Everybody's
will.
really worrying about King 10 though.
yeah, King 10, but again, it's just one combo. Well, it's not
Yeah.
suited, not like there's a lot of different combos in there that could be that King 10, but it's really like it's King 10. It is the sets. Um, Having top two is nice. Plus, they are going to be making that value bet sometimes with like Queen Jack with that smaller two pair or something, maybe with a different sizing or a different line. But, and I don't think we're saying that you're never ahead. I think we're just saying that as a range, as a proportion of the range, it feels like a call. I definitely do not fold the turn, so I'm certainly calling or raising, as you say, probably calling in my case. And then I don't know if I can get away from it on the river. I'm probably going broke on that hand too.
Most of us will, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think it's worthwhile thinking about what will somebody at that level
Mm-hmm.
assume that we're going to do as rec players.
Mm-hmm.
And is he going to really put his tournament life at risk if he can't beat an ace high?
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, I don't know. Depends on the reg, right? Depends on the pro. So
Right.
I don't know.
It's really nice to be put yourself in that position on the river. It is incredibly hard for villain at this point. If you call that 100K bet and you get to a
Mhm.
river and they've got 270 back, think about that spot, whatever the river is, um, unless it is something that just changes the board entirely, like a king or a 10. It is really hard to pull that third barrel on if you've been just messing around here with some kind of weird bluff, um, because you've shown such strength here. You've bet out, you've called a raise, you've called a lead out after that raise, and now you're at I mean, like, I don't.
Yeah.
It
What
seems like a
hands?
bad time to bluff.
That
So
What
yes.
what hands does he think you're going to fold
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that have done that action so far?
And then,
right,
given that that's the case, what is he actually value
right,
raising with here that you beat?
right.
Because then,
Right.
if you say that he's taking a different line with a lot of those middle strength hands, they're probably not falling into this line.
And really the thing that I can talk myself into the most is Queen Jack. Like
Yeah, me too.
that's like the one combination that makes sense this whole line, and like we beat it the whole time. Well, we don't beat it the whole time. We beat it by the turn. Um, and but that's only one combo, and there's a number of things I can say that we're losing to at this
hmm
point. So I'm I don't know. I don't know.
Our friend TV Stensby, Tron Vidar, one of our great international members, did run it through GTO and GTO Plus, and I think they said in here that the EV difference between calling and shoving was actually very close. Where did I say that? You know what? I won't waste everyone's time. folks, we go through these forum posts and we kind of pull the best part out of it for our subject conversation, but there's all sorts of charts and graphs in there. Keith's taken screenshots of his solver work and put it in there. Tron Vidar has made some notes about his solver use. So I do encourage you, we're going to touch on the highlights today, but go to rec.poker, get a free community account, and just check out the forums. This one is called Top 2 Pair on the Turn Facing Aggression. And there's lots of good stuff in there. So let's just take a little break to hear from our friend Jonathan Little, and then we'll wrap this baby up.
I don't hear anything.
Oh no! Oh no! I know what's happening.
We
Did you
didn't hear
guys
the
see?
music in the intro either.
Yeah, we didn't. Classic Jim audio cue. So that's good. We are on par. I'm going to leave this in. We're going to let everyone know. This is what happens. So you guys missed the opening audio cue, and now we missed our. I told you guys we were going to have some fun today with the first version of this. All right, now let's listen to our friend Jonathan Little.
Have you ever wondered whether you should call a preflop raise or 3-bet instead? What do you do when you have a flush draw? Do you raise it, or do you just call? What do you do with ace-king when you miss the flop? Are you tired of guessing about what the right play is with your particular hand? Well, my name is Jonathan Little, and I am a 2-time World Poker Tour champion and creator of PokerCoaching.com, where we offer over 1,000 interactive hand quizzes where you play a hand and then get real-time feedback from our world-class pros. Don't guess and don't stress. Just register for your free account at PokerCoaching.com/recpoker right now.
I mean, that does sound pretty good. I don't want to stress. I stress out enough just playing the ads.
Just the audio content. That's stressful enough.
Well, thanks to Jonathan Little for helping support the podcast. So last thoughts on this, folks. When are you going to be inclined to do these min clickbacks and stuff like that? Like, I'll tell you, I'm more inclined to do it on the flop in position, because I feel like that's when I can get the most usable information about it. I get to use it on future streets, and that's where people's ranges are still very wide. You can leverage a big stack with a small raise. So you can write this down. If I'm doing this out of position, you should fold. If I'm doing this in position, you might be able to get me off a hand or something. What about you guys?
Yeah, I agree. I love what John said. When I'm in position, this is a really great way to buy yourself a cheap river. If you've got a hand, if on this board you had like a king 10 kind of hand and you want to like just see if you can make your straight or kind of get there, like it's a nice sort of way to do that. But when it's out of position, I would say that I wouldn't say I'd never do it, but I think I might never do it.
Yeah.
I might never do it. And so when other players do it, I'm just like, whoa, what's happening here? So
yeah, Nate Mavis always talks about on the Thinking podcast. He always thinks about he looks at his spot and he thinks, okay, do I want to have a raising range here? And maybe he doesn't. And then it doesn't even matter what's in his hand, because he knows this isn't a good spot to be making a raise. So he's going to only have different ranges. I think this is one of those spots where, as Chris says, yeah, I might never do this click back.
Well, I would have a raising range, but not a min raising range.
To this sizing. Yeah. Good point. Yep. Thank you. Yep. All right. Well, let's see.
Yeah, my own raising size would be big.
Yeah.
It would be almost an overbet. Pot size raise.
Especially out of position, right? I mean, you don't want to be giving people enticing odds to play a bigger pot in position against you. They're making it easy for them. Chris?
Yeah, and this might be something I'm missing out on, but if I had pocket sixes in this exact spot, I'd be calling this bet almost every time.
The flop bet?
The flop bet. As villain in this position, and I'd be checking turn and kind of playing in flow, and I might be losing out on some value there. So this might be a good spot to look at. Maybe this, but it just screams value to me. So you've got to be really careful, and you've got to figure out how to do this effectively.
Yeah, with this exact play, I'd probably do like you say, call the flop, and then check raise the turn.
Yep.
With the ace coming in, you figure it's a good chance that your opponent hit it, And if they didn't, you aren't going to get any more money out of them anyway.
Yep.
And it's a fairly straightening board, so you want to get your value while you're still ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it feels like that's the kind of more conventional line would be the check call, check raise. And maybe that's, it's conventional and not perfect as a consequence. Like
Yep.
this guy found some value there. And I think one thing that's really nice about these little clickbacks is that you do get to find out a lot about your opponent's range by how they choose to respond. Just like we talked about with Mystery Player M back in the day. You're kind of capping your range by not raising over the top. You now have to be very thoughtful with how you construct that continuing range, and it puts you in an uncomfortable spot as we see. So, well done, villain. I can't got hats off to the pro. He made a good play there, and I think if you had a different hand, if you weren't handcuffed to top 2 pair on the turn there, who knows how this would have gone. I think he got lucky that you had that exact hand there as well. That was gonna pay him off.
Yeah, he actually told that to me at a future tournament.
Oh, yeah?
We talked about it.
Yeah.
He felt like he got really lucky there.
Right. Yep. I think he's right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Steve Fredlin doesn't always join us for these forums edition of the podcast. That's because he's so busy with his day job, which he also loves, which is at smallbusiness.com, helping small business owners support themselves and move from surviving to thriving in this new world. So if you want to work with Steve and you don't play poker, I don't know why you're listening to this, but go to smallbusiness.com. It's a great way to work with Steve. And if he's busy enough there, then maybe he can take some time off and join us for some of these podcasts. But that being said, I would like to thank Chris Jones, Rob Washington, John Somsky, Keith Brandt, thank you so much for coming with us today. And also Website Amp and Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino.